Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Oh man, some high-risk poker here. Nikki Glaser dared invoke the name of Taylor Swift while performing comedy. You got to be careful doing that. I mean, one time Joe Coy did that, and whoo, it did not go well. Nikki Glaser was at the ESPYs. Let's listen.
But I've actually been a huge fan of sports ever since I first watched Taylor Swift watch a football game. It really changed my life, because now I know who Patrick Mahomes is. I mean, before I only knew him as that guy in the State Farm ads, and based on his acting, I just assumed he was the CEO's son. But truly, it is such an honor to present the award for Best Male Athlete. The nominees include peak athletes who push their bodies to the limit, and also a golfer. I'm sorry, Scotty. I do know that golfing is hard. I mean, there's putting, chipping, and driving over a cop's leg. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that nothing will stand in the way of these incredible athletes in their pursuit of greatness. I mean, except the Florida Panthers. But boy, Connor, that must have hurt. To lose a game of ice hockey to a place that doesn't even have ice. For now, the only Stanley Cup Connor will get to hold is the one his wife asked him to grab out of the cabinet. But let's get to it, because no one is more excited to find out the winner than me. Well, except for Shohei's interpreter, because he's got a lot of money riding on this, so...
Good clip there by Nikki. She is riding high. Normally I lead off with the late night jokes. There was one from Jimmy Fallon that I think illustrates the point I was getting into with Alex Bennett 9 days ago on this podcast. If you missed it, I interviewed Alex Bennett, who's 84 years old, and Alex doesn't appreciate old jokes. And I said, I like a good old joke that's not really about anything. Here's one from Jimmy Fallon. This is what I'm talking about. Joe Biden hasn't seen this many people jump ship since he took that vacation on the Titanic. It's funny. Is the Titanic a tragedy? Yes. From 110 years ago, was Joe Biden on the Titanic? I don't think so. I'd have to check. See, same thing there. It's just a joke. It's silly. Obviously, Joe Biden wasn't on the Titanic. He's not that old. It's okay. You can make jokes about things sometimes. That Louis C.K. documentary came out. The Washington Post didn't love it. They gave it 2.5 stars out of 5, I believe. The New York Times had a similar meh review. Apparently the gist is people aren't sure why we're dusting this off again. The Washington Post did write, perhaps the most dismaying sentiment in this gloomy film is delivered by an anonymous comedy fan who apparently bought a ticket to watch CK perform at Madison Square Garden last year. On camera, the young man explains away his guilty pleasure, saying with a shrug, everyone lives with a certain amount of hypocrisy, and this is the amount I've allocated for myself. Wow. This thing's 90 minutes. I wish it were just streaming somewhere. I would definitely watch it. I don't know if I'm going to purchase it, but it's on the video on demand. Sam Morrill, did you watch his special from last week? That was pretty good. Unfortunately for me, one of Sam's big comedy influences were the movies of Adam Sandler. Ugh. Sam's brother showed me Billy Madison, and I couldn't believe it existed. I was like, oh my God, this was made for me. Adam Sandler is so immature and outrageous. Then you grow up and you watch it as an adult and you love it for different reasons, or you watch it as an adult and you go, I can't believe anyone likes this movie. Sam says one of the first albums that I really got into was Chris Rock's. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was so thoughtful and intelligent. Even at a young age, I didn't get all the jokes, but the ones I did get, I was like, wow. Rodney Dangerfield reminded me of my grandpa, so I love Rodney Dangerfield. Back to School remains my comfort movie. Sam's first set, I drank 4 beers during my first stand-up set. I was only on stage for like 5 minutes, so not good. It was an open mic. I had a friend come with me, and he laughed at all my jokes. He was the only one laughing. It was pretty brutal, but I did feel good that I did it. I got over it. I'd go into Barnes & Noble and just read joke books, and I'd be like, okay, that's how you write a joke. I would study the structure. I could make my friends laugh, but it takes a while to figure that out on stage. One of my first jokes was, my teacher told me I reminded her of a young Hemingway. I was like, why? Because I'm a good writer? And she goes, no, you're an alcoholic who's going to kill himself. That is a pretty good joke. Sam says, some of my jokes stunk, but I had a couple that were like, all right, not bad. If you don't have any stories as a kid, you haven't lived life. There's nothing interesting that you're going to say. Friend of the show, Scott Beckett, who's probably very thankful that I didn't play the Joe Coy clip, but there's plenty of time left in today's podcast, Scott. And it is a summer Monday, so it's possible the show's a little short. We'll see what happens here. Scott sent over this clip of Jerry Seinfeld talking about manliness.
I've always wanted to be a real man. I never made it, but
I really thought when I was in that era, again, it was JFK, it was Muhammad Ali, it was Sean Connery, Howard Cosell. You can go all the way down there. That's a real man. I want to be like that someday. Well, no, I never really grew up. I mean, you don't want to as a comedian because it's a childish pursuit. But I miss a dominant masculinity. Yeah, I get the toxic thing. I get it. But still, I like a real man.
Jason Alexander, you know him from Seinfeld, pretty popular sitcom back in the 1990s. He was talking about the George Costanza bobblehead. Recently, the Yankees gave out 18,000 of these bobbleheads. People bugged Jason Alexander on social media about it. And Jason tweeted, "I'm so glad Bobblehead George was a fan fave. Nope, I don't get anything for it except joy that 35 years after putting on those glasses, people are still enjoying our work. The show is a gift from you to us. Thank you for keeping it alive." By the way, if you watch the early episodes of Seinfeld, Jason Alexander as George Costanza is how old? He's 29. Yeah, 29. I also learned if you watch the first season of Gilligan's Island, the skipper, he's 43. Mr. Howell, he's 51. I could lose some weight, but compared to all that, I look pretty good. Backpacker Andy Samberg was on Kevin Hart's Peacock show, which is called Heart to Heart. I'm going to put Heart to Heart in the Bob's Burgers category. Have you ever seen Heart to Heart, and have you ever met anyone who's seen Heart to Heart? I'm sure Peacock thinks it exists, and Kevin probably tells them that they film episodes, but has anyone ever seen this thing? Samberg said he left Saturday Night Live in 2012 to prioritize his physical and mental health, telling Kevin Hart, "For me, it was like I can't actually endure it anymore. Physically and emotionally, I was falling apart in my life." He explained that the schedule for SNL involved working long hours to write for the live show while making new digital shorts weekly, and it became difficult. Physically, it was taking a heavy toll on me, and I got to a place where I hadn't slept in 7 years. It's basically like 4 days a week, you're not sleeping for 7 years. I just kind of fell apart physically. Brad Williams spoke to Trib Live and said, "A lot of people ask about a comedy career, and it's kind of like when someone loses a lot of weight. Someone says, 'Hey, how'd you lose the weight?' They know the answer, but they're hoping at the time you say, 'Oh, I took this magical pill, woke up every day, kept eating junk food, kept not exercising, and all the weight just fell off, and now I have a six-pack.' It's kind of like that with comedy. When people are like, 'How'd you make it in comedy?' They're waiting for you to tell them, 'Oh, I decided to be a comedian one day, so I went down and met with the vice president of show business, and I said that I'd like to be a comedian.' They said, 'Great, here are your jokes, here are your tour dates, go be funny.' That's not how it happens. It's a long grind." I haven't done the international stuff in a minute. Over on Chortle, Tim Harding, under the headline, "You'll struggle to find a better overview of what's good in stand-up right now." Okay, let's see what's going on. Tim headed over to the Actually Rather Good Comedy Festival. ARG stands for Actually Rather Good Comedy Festival. Chortle writes, "As usual, ARG gave us a roadmap for the Fringe, highlighting some great new acts and building some buzz around promising shows. Here's some of Tim's favorites. Clown King John Luke Roberts is putting on a retrospective this year of all his previous shows. It wasn't my favorite of his shows, but I love when comedians mount old work, and I'd love to see it happen more." I'm guessing that's more of a British-Australian thing of where you're doing more themed hours rather than, I don't know, do we want to see Chris Rock get up and do his greatest hits? Maybe we do want to see Chris Rock get up and do his greatest hits. Who knows? Lou Wall really bowled me over when I saw him for the first time last year. Lou Wall versus the Internet was an incredibly full-on multimedia experience. Their new show, The Bisexual's Lament, is even better, slowing things down to a rate where it can now be perceived by the human head and turning a genuinely horrific-sounding year into a tragic-comic musical epic. This is the most excited I've been about a new comedian in a while. All right. Abby Wambach made a promising impression with their work in progress, the first 3 minutes of 17 shows. What a great eye concept for a debut hour. It's such a fun way to keep the show dynamic and entertaining when you're regularly switching between mime, musical, props, and other styles of stand-up. Milo Edwards' new show, How Revolting, Sorry to Offend. Once again, using his family history as a jumping-off point while launching into a rangy explanation of the British class system. And, a word I don't want to say on the show. It's like, say you really enjoy something and then things get sticky. That. Trying to keep it clean. Now, yesterday, I was telling you about the Edinburgh Fringe shows that The Guardian was excited about, and I realized I shouldn't read 20 in a row. Some of the shows are excited about. Dan Tiernan's Stomp. I've seen Dan's name a few times recently. I guess the Gorilla Guys mentioned Dan on Saturday, didn't they? Quite the debut last year from Dan. whose show Going Under raged at Tiernan's lot in life. Gay but straight-seeming, at odds with his sickeningly nice stepdad, a Best Newcomer nomination followed, and so expectations are raised for his follow-up. John Tothill lies on a sofa wearing zebra-striped boots and holding a rose in one hand, a wine glass in the other, and looking wry, surrounded by balloons. Teacher turned stand-up. Made an impression at last year's Fringe with an unlike anything else faux sermon on hedonism and transcendence through history, camp, flirty, and delighted with everything. John Tothill returns with something to do with biblical plagues. Also from Chortle, comedy club owners hit back after venues branded their club unclean. That's right, the folks at Nottingham's Just the Tonic Comedy Club are not happy at being named the second filthiest entertainment venue in the UK. Some reviews on TripAdvisor found that more than 1 in 10 visitors mentioned dirtiness in the comments. The only club dirtier is the Heaven nightclub in London, in case you're curious. Some comments: the floor was so dirty that my shoes stuck to it. That's half the bars that I spent my 20s in. However, that comment was left more than a decade ago when the club was in another location. Club founder Daryl Martin told Chortle, all this report shows us how stupid TripAdvisor is and how you can't do anything with it even years after changes have been made. Analyzing reviews from 12 years ago and assuming they're relevant today is similar to looking at photos of Britain in the 70s and saying that all British people today seem to have really long hair. Another visitor mentioned, despite the toilets being filthy and the hand dryer being broken, we had a good night. And that is your comedy news for today. If you would like this program without these pesky commercials, if you're on Apple Podcasts, click the banner, 30-day free trial. And then after that, it's $4.99 a month. If you're on Spotify or Android, go to the link in the show notes, calaroga.com/plus. $4.99 a month. No commercials. Oh, and The Artist is out today. You like serial killers, don't you? Yeah, I bet you do. Well, we've got a heck of a show about a serial killer. Rated R for mature audiences only. It is called The Artist, A Killer's Canvas. That's right, The Artist, A Killer's Canvas. As a half-ass Mark Norman impression might say, download it. Check it out. See you tomorrow.